is Renee, and I'm delighted that y'all could be here tonight. I'd also like to welcome those of you who are viewing this program through our live stream tonight. If you could take a few moments to share your thoughts on the forms available in your chair or around you, we would appreciate your feedback. Your programming suggestions and ideas really help us plan our future events. It's my pleasure to welcome Ahrens to the library again this evening. Caitlin is currently working on her Ph.D. in Space and Planetary Science at the University of Arkansas. She helped plan and build the Pluto Laboratory at the Arkansas Center for Planetary Simulations and now manages it. Along with her current research, she is a NASA Solar System Ambassador. Caitlin also guest hosts a mini radio show with local NPR radio station KUAF 91.3 called Scratching the Surface. Please help me welcome Caitlin Ahrens.
There's more of these. Yay. Awesome. More people, goody. I may or may not have enough. No, you got here.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Woo. Okay, constellations. Oh. So you're probably wondering why the ABCD cards was because you guys are going to be my students tonight. I teach astronomy at the local university here as well, and I have to have my students have the same cards because whenever you have a room full of 300-some students, you can't have them all just yell out the answer because you're going to get probably A, B, C, and D. So at least color cards help me at least focus, like, okay, is it all pink? Is it all yellow? Is it all green? Or do I just see a whole bunch of colors? So let's get started. So constellations really have an interesting background as far as storytelling goes. They did serve a purpose at one point, though, and we'll certainly go over that. But spanning across cultures, different kinds of mythologies, the stories, the lessons behind some of the mythologies, though, really gets interesting, determining what culture, what side of the world you're on, what hemisphere you're in as well. And then just certainly, how did we have constellations altogether? So, looking up beautiful night sky and whatnot, and why astronomers even have constellations is because we really want to know what part of the sky are we actually looking at. So connect the dots. That's essentially what we do. We connected the dots, and each region of the sky tells us, okay, we have that certain section of the sky is Leo, that certain section of the sky is Ursa Major, and so on and so forth, though. So in total, there's actually 88 different constellations all around the world. And it's not like, oh, there's 44 in the north, 44 in the south, or anything. No, it's just purely regions. There's different sizes of constellations. Some are really small and cute and adorable. But essentially, they are just set up as boundaries for us astronomers, especially if we want to know where something is. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath because I had to run here. Oh, goodness. All right. But for example, though, as far as boundaries go, so say like I wanted to know where Alpha Centauri is. Alpha Centauri is our nearest star to our own solar system. But take a look at the word, though. Alpha meaning the brightest star of Centaurus, Alpha Centauri. Usually brightest stars of a constellation is named Alpha, and then that constellation name. So Alpha Scorpii, Alpha Aquila, Alpha Aquarii, and then Beta and Gamma and Delta and so on and so forth through the Greek alphabet. But in a cultural sense, making up some of those shapes have certainly evolved over centuries. But it's amazing how some of those shapes have actually kept true to form through several cultures, especially Orion, and we'll get to that soon. But essentially, these are the kinds of maps that we have Now these are the modern star maps for astronomers, trying to figure out certain star placements, the different hemispheres. You have a southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere. The lovely cloud that you see running through, that is actually the Milky Way. Through the Milky Way, you would actually have some of the zodiac constellations. And then lo and behold, there's actually different kinds of constellations. It's not just, oh, let's just connect the dots and you have a pretty picture. Look, it looks like a dog. No, there are actually specific types. So circumpolar are constellations that never leave the side of the North Star. They never rise, they never set, they just keep going round and round and round and round. Zodiac, not just for astrology people, it's not for horoscopes or anything like that. I certainly get that question asked quite a bit, like, oh, I'm an Aquarius. No. For the purpose of zodiac constellations, it's purely the placement of those constellations. So if you imagine this room to just be filled with stars, top to bottom, all over the place, where we're encased in stars all around you, your eye level would be the zodiac. So Earth, in a whole globe of stars, our eye level toward the whole vastness of plane, our ecliptic plane toward everything, that's the zodiac constellations. So having those zodiac constellations really helps us out as far as seasons go, because that zodiac constellations actually pop up every season, and they change every season too. So if you see a specific zodiac constellation up at night, then it's like, oh, it must be this season. Nothing to do with horoscopes. And then a little thing called asterisms. So asterisms are not really constellations, but they're used very often, very, very often. And I'll give a grand example about an asterism here pretty soon, though. But this is a beautiful picture of circumpolar stars. This is over the Grand Canyon out in Arizona. It's very pretty, and they're very easy to make, these kinds of photos. If you take a long exposure photo and you point it right toward the north, you can clearly see the dot in the center that's not moving is the North Star. And all the stars move, rise in the east, set in the west, all the way around it. Yep, that is just one night. That is one long exposure. So we call those star trails, which are really pretty. So again, zodiac, we technically have 12, but lo and behold, there is actually a 13th constellation making its way into our zodiac view, or point of view, as it were, called Ophiuchus. So I've actually gotten an audience member once before who was very much into astrology, and she was demanding to know why NASA decided to put the 13th zodiac in the line. I'm like, NASA doesn't control any of this. As entertaining as that would be, no. Nope, this is just purely for seasons. Purely for seasons. All right, so anybody want to take a guess as to what these lovely groups of stars are? Big Dipper, exactly. So we all think of the Big Dipper, but lo and behold, the Big Dipper, this is actually an asterism. This is not a true constellation. So an asterism being, this is actually a part of a much larger constellation. So the Big Dipper is actually a part of Ursa Major. Much larger constellation in that regard, though. But we recognize the ladle. We recognize the dipper part. Okie dokie. So now I'd like to do a little bit of history of star charts, because these are gorgeous. These are beautiful works of art that have gone through many centuries to try to better organize our sense of constellations, our organization through mathematics, our navigation, all sorts of fun stuff. The earliest record we actually have, I thought this was really cool, was a carved mammoth tusk showing Orion, and then cave drawings in France. I was like, oh, this is so cool, this is awesome. And then 50 BC, we have the Dendera zodiac. The Dendera zodiac is very popular to see. It's gorgeous, and I'll show you a photo here in a bit, though. But it's on the ceiling on the Temple of Osiris. So Osiris was regarded as the guardian toward the afterlife, looking over the pharaohs. Certainly a prominent name in Egyptian mythology, though. So having a zodiac in regards to Osiris was Osiris's star map to the afterlife. The Greeks had the Farnese Atlas. Atlas was a giant titan that had been bounded to hold the earth upon his shoulders and the celestial sphere. So that was actually carved marble. And then the Chinese, we have the Dunhuang star chart as well. So this is the Dendera zodiac from the Osiris temple. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. So what's really interesting is that it actually held, and it's much bigger. It goes into the walls as well, though, but this is certainly the ceiling part. Now they've actually have this, or at least a stone carving of this at the Louvre in France. But certain star positions and planetary positions are listed as well as far as seasons go. And that was the only reason for constellations for the Egyptians, was purely for agricultural reasons. And then the Farnese Atlas. This is where the Greeks certainly proved themselves worthy in terms of mathematics. It's not a flat map. The spherical shape and then the regions on the sphere of each of those constellations and symbols are accurate. They are very accurate. And astronomers, this is cool. So how long ago this has been and how they've actually been able to depict what region of the sky certain constellations were. Astronomers and scientists and then anthropology people actually got to map out how did their sky change from our sky, which is interesting. Our pole, our Earth pole, actually does move just a little tiny bit, so our night sky would look very different than ancient Greece. So now we got to get a really good, accurate representation of, okay, if that's what their night sky looked like, how does it compare to ours? Just slightly different, everything just slightly tilted over time. And then a little bit of the Dunhuang Atlas from China, 700 AD. This is actually a booklet. This isn't just a one-page map. It's like a whole booklet of different drawings and so on. So you could actually see a little bit of the Dipper here, which I thought was really neat. And then a little bit of Orion. A little bit of Orion's belt there. So Orion really appears very prominent in a lot of cultures. And then much later, after having certain star maps and certain depictions, we certainly wanted to get more artsy with constellations. Not so much of the mapping part, but certainly more of the drawing aspect, the art Renaissance part of these constellations. Beautiful characterizations of the mythologies, the animals involved. Certainly the math you can do, these are for moon phases and so on, but certainly the artwork involved with the constellations really, really boomed in the 1600s. Alrighty. So again, like I was saying before, mostly used for agriculture, navigation certainly, and then obviously mythology, which I'm going to have a fun time talking to you guys about here pretty soon, and some of the really weird stories that have evolved with some of those constellations. But navigation, always know where Polaris is. Polaris is the formal term name for the North Star. If you know where the North Star is, you should know where you are on Earth. Unless you're in the South, you can't see the North Star. My students had an interesting time with that. Oops. And then mathematics, like I said before, showing you maps and whatnot, it's purely for coordinates, knowing where certain stars are. All right, so again, back to this lovely drawing here. How do you navigate your way around? As long as you know where the Big Dipper is, you can actually take the 2 stars of the bucket, go straight up, and the next brightest star you have is your North Star. Now, that may be fine and dandy, but you might be thinking, well, what if I'm in the middle of the ocean and I have no cell service, and that'd be an interesting scenario of how you find yourself in that kind of scenario. But okay, so what if you were? So what happens is that if you remember that and you find the North Star, you're like, great. There it is. Now what? If you figure out the angle of which the North Star is from your point of view, whether it's like way up, 45 degrees, if it's really down by the horizon there, the same angle of your point of view with that North Star is your latitude on the Earth. So if you see the North Star and it's like, oh, there's 45 degrees, I'm at 45 degrees north latitude. So for Fayetteville, we're actually somewhere between 35 to 40 degrees north. So Polaris would be around that same angle. If you're lo and behold, if you're in the North Pole, it's going to be straight up. All right, now for the fun part, which I'm sure all of you have come here to hear about the random stories. The dynamics of the gods. Certainly dynamics of the gods. Whether it's by celebrations, usually you would have heroes that have done something courageous, or they've won a battle, or they've shown their bravery. They would be celebrated up into the heavens, or as punishments, which unfortunately has been most of the cases that I've found through cultures. Is usually with punishments. You did something bad, the gods were upset with you, off to the sky you go. So, good old Orion. So Orion is gorgeous to see. It's even better through a telescope. But Orion, in a sense, it looks like some sort of figure. Whether it's a stick figure, a soldier, a warrior, something like that. But they always have the 3 stars to be some sort of belt. The 3 stars here, some sort of weapon, usually a club or a sword. And then the bright red star up there is Betelgeuse. So Betelgeuse being a red giant, very, very bright red star in that regard, usually marks either a bravery symbol or a wound of the warrior. Fun fact too, you're going to have to find a really dark sky though, but you could essentially see those 3 stars of the sword. If you do, or look through binoculars, because that works too, the second star, the star in the middle, that is called the Jewel of the Sword. That's actually the Orion Nebula. It's that big. It's really, really pretty. All right, so good old Orion. So the Romans and Greeks actually share a very common story. The namings actually switch back and forth between Roman and Greek, but the story surprisingly stays the same. So Orion actually fell in love with a mortal girl, which you're going to actually see that to be very common through a lot of mythologies, though. Something from the heavens falling in love with something mortal. And of course, it's going to end poorly. It's like, I kid you not, going through these and picking and choosing what stories to tell you guys, it was like typing up soap operas. Like, I couldn't make this stuff up. But the Greeks did. They beat us to some really interesting soap opera material. All right, so you have Orion, a very, very strong, masculine demigod kind of character. Falls in love with a mortal girl. Her father disapproved and blinded him. But he was supposed to be one of the best hunters. So how he got his sight back actually was that he had to stand on top of the highest mountain and then stare directly into the sunset. Don't do that. That actually causes blindness, not reverse it. So yes, he looked directly back into the sun, got his sight back. Best friends with good old Artemis, who is goddess of hunting. Apollo was Artemis's brother and was like, no, you can't hang out with him. And tricks Orion's friend and shoots him. Oops. But there's two separate things though. Either Artemis shoots Orion by accident, or Apollo sends a Scorpio, to kill Orion. So there's two different stories in that regard. It depends upon what part of Rome or Greece that you're getting the story from. So Scorpio, which I'll talk about later though, but Scorpio is actually found on the opposite side of the constellation sky, because Artemis was like, oh no, I killed my best friend by accident. Oh, that's a bad scorpion. I'm gonna keep that as far away from my friend, as far away as possible. So that was all to his good friend there, who still accidentally shot him, so. Oops. But Orion, through other cultures though, especially the Egyptians, they thought that was Osiris, leading people to the afterlife. You have Ceres, which is a very bright star right next to the heel of Orion, symbolizing, usually supposed to symbolize the hunting dog toward Orion. But for the Egyptians, it was actually the start of the mummification process, because the amount that Ceres is kept up in the sky is the same amount of time for the mummification process. So they timed it. As soon as they saw Ceres, they're like, oh, time to do that. Time to get to picking and wrapping. That's essentially it. Chinese, they named him Shen. So each of the stars represented army generals. Different kinds of Native American cultures usually had them as chieftains, hunters. I like this one though, the Chinook, the canoe racing to catch the big fish, which is serious. So very, very interesting how all of them have associated Orion to be of hunting origins of some sort. All right, so back to Ursa Major here. With the beautiful Big Dipper and whatnot. You either have it as a Big Dipper with some cultures, or you truly have it as a bear. So Ursa Major, Ursa meaning bear, so big bear. This has an interesting little sad story. Again, whether it's Jupiter or Zeus, but if you know your mythologies, Jupiter, Zeus, the god of gods in the Greek and Roman mythologies, love to have other women. So you have beautiful Callisto and Jupiter get together, make a son. Juno, Jupiter's wife, was like, how dare he, turns Callisto into a bear, but not the sun. They kept them separate because Juno wanted the sun to become a hunter and shoot Callisto. And just as he was about to do that, Jupiter was like, nope. They're both going to be bears. I'm going to shoot them up into the sky so you can't touch them anymore. Yeah. Juno, however, was like, no, I still don't like that. I still need to seek revenge. So Juno demanded Neptune, the god of the seas, the god of the water, to never let the bears touch water. Never let the bears touch earth again. So that is why that's why in mythology, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor are circumpolar stars. They never rise, they never set. So technically, they never touch Earth. So that is certainly the Roman side. I believe the Greeks had something very similar to that. But Callisto, you'll notice some names to be very similar here too. So Callisto, Europa, I blanked on the name, Io and Ganymede are all lovers of Jupiter. And they happen to all be the 4 major moons of Jupiter in the sky, for real. So, lovely how astronomers have named things from mythology. But another thing too, again, looks like a giant bear. In Hindi, however, the 7 stars of the ladle have represented the 7 sages, which are immortal wise men. And then a Native American, they had the dipper handle to be hunters pursuing a bear. Pretty accurate, okay. As far as we remember, kind of deal. But Ursa Major also has a really interesting historic aspect to it too. Mainly with runaway slaves, you have the drinking gourd. Because again, the drinking gourd, the Big Dipper, leads to the North Star. Especially if you know where the North Star is. So that helped the freedom movement into the North. And then I thought this was interesting, the Irish Republican movements. They had the plow and dagger, but it makes up the stars of what we see as the Big Dipper. So I thought that was pretty cool, though. So that was their Republican flag. All right, has anybody seen the movie Moana? A few people, okay. So in Moana, I'm not gonna have any spoilers or anything though, but Moana needs to find the magical hook of Maui, and she is given no map or anything except to say, follow the stars. Follow that specific constellation, and it points her to Maui's dagger, Maui's hook. That particular constellation happens to be Scorpio. They don't say it particularly much in the movie, but that's perfectly fine, because in the Polynesian culture is truly the Hook of Maui, which is their ultimate god in that sense. Romans and Greeks, it all has to deal with Orion, Orion's nemesis, so it was put on the opposite side of the sky, like, nope, get away. But this one was really pretty, though. The Chinese actually had certain constellations be certain types of dragons. So they had red dragons, black dragons, blue dragons, yellow dragons, green dragons. So Scorpio was the blue dragon of the season, and it changed colors depending upon the season. And it changed different constellations, too. So Scorpio, being a more October, November constellation, it was the blue dragon. Okay, as far as mythology goes, this is probably my favorite. This is Cygnus. So Cygnus is the swan. Very, very pretty pictures, though. But take a look if you could try to see the bigger picture here, though. So Cygnus, head is there, the wings are there, and the tail is there. But the wings actually span across this interesting cluster of stars going right across, like someone sneezed, stars all over the picture here. That's actually the Milky Way. And that's very important to see that, how big that constellation is, and the wingspan to go across the Milky Way. That shows up a lot in the mythology. So one of them, not terribly much with the Greeks though, but for the Greeks, Zeus disguised himself as a swan to swoon mortal maidens. Yep, pretty much. In the Polynesian ones, you have some sort of hen or bird being chased by a fox, which is Vulpecula, which is shown right here. That's a very interesting depiction of a fox, but I didn't draw it. And then the Native Americans, you have, this one I thought was really pretty. The Shoshone had a grizzly bear that had climbed so high into the heavens that ice crystals fell off of its fur and leaving a trail. And that is the Milky Way. So that's very pretty. Favorite mythology involving Cygnus, though. There's actually an entire festival in China and Japan centered around Cygnus the swan, all due to a mythological tale. So in Chinese and Japanese culture, you have heavenly maiden falling in love with a poor mortal farm boy. Love is forbidden. Lovers are banished to opposite sides of the Silver River, which is the Milky Way. On the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, a flock of magpies or swans form a bridge to reunite the lovers. So, in China and Japan, they both have the evening of sevens. So this is essentially their version of Valentine's Day for us. But as far as mythology goes, and then trying to bring the mythology into modern times, that's probably the best scenario, the best tale I could possibly find as far as culture goes. So I thought that was really pretty, though. So just a few more constellations, though. What does that look like to you guys? I've heard all sorts of stuff. I've heard bug. I've heard lines. Utensil, okay. Hey, we have utensil constellations. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. Nope, so surprisingly, that entire drawing of lines is Taurus the bull. So very long horns. Very, very long horns. All right, so you have Taurus the bull. In, again, Greek and Roman, there's two different alternate stories here. One is you either have Zeus or Jupiter disguising himself as the great white bull to woo Europa. Europa then bears a child who becomes King Minos of Crete, and Crete then becomes a whole island for bullfighting. And because of that, they have honored Zeus to disguise himself as a bull in that regard. Again, alternate story, you have Zeus disguising Io, yet another maiden, who he wasn't supposed to be seeing, disguising Io as a bull to hide from his wife. Zeus, what are you doing? Zeus has a lot of interesting stories, to the point I'm sure there's books on Zeus. But Native American, you have, again, a great white buffalo. One of the prize, an analogy for the great hunting prize, a holy grail of hunting, specifically for the Dakotas. Cassiopeia is an entertaining tale. There's a lot more to this tale that I left out because I was afraid that there would be children in the audience. So if you want to hear more about Cassiopeia's mythology, I encourage you to go Google it, though. So this is the very much shortened version of Cassiopeia. But essentially, she was almost like Snow White's wicked stepmother, just very vain, just thought she was the most beautiful, just really wanted it for herself, was jealous of her daughter to be the most beautiful, and actually, I'll say, chained Andromeda, her own daughter, to a rock to actually be eaten by a sea dragon. Oops. Luckily, daughter was saved, all was fine, all was well, but Neptune and or Poseidon, god of the seas, got mad. It's like, no, how dare you use my sea dragon for punishment? She's beautiful, and she's your daughter. What are you doing? No. Up to the sky she goes, forever to remain chained on her chair, and forever looking into a mirror as punishment for her vanity. Poor Cassiopeia. But he's always a W shape in the sky. And then Native American, you have some sort of elk or deer skin stretched into the sky. Just a little side note of like, yeah, by the way. And then last one I'm going to say real quick, though, is Aquila. Aquila is certainly the thunderbird of the Greeks, the keeper of thunderbolts and the keeper of the love arrows from Ahrens. So certainly keeper of all arrows. Make sure that Zeus is ready for battle. His trusty thunderbird is at his side. But again, with the theme of battle, with the theme of war, the Chinese have almost shaped Aquila into some sort of battle drum. So going through all these constellations, you see almost a pattern where you have very masculine constellations of battle versus, or like hunter for Orion and whatnot. But going down south, going down under, you have the Aborigines in Australia. They have their own set of mythology, which are very hard to find, because at least the Greeks and the Chinese and the Romans and the Native Americans have actually passed down their stories from generations to generations. Unfortunately, the Aborigines have not. Unfortunately. There are little bits and pieces that you could find here and there, but essentially their mythology is not based on you connect the dots and tell a story. Their mythology is based on the Milky Way. So all of these darker spots in the Milky Way that you can see here, and this is a true image. We don't know what our own Milky Way looks like. These are certainly arms of the Milky Way you can see across the sky. Really, really dark skies in Australia. No light pollution out there. But all the little dark patches within the galaxy arm of our Milky Way are shapes. And those shapes become the mythologies. So one in particular is, it's hard to see obviously with this picture though. I couldn't find a better picture though, but somewhere in the middle is supposed to be a dark cloud that's supposed to be a horse for their mythology. A horse to ride across the sky and bring the cluster of stars. So almost like Apollo, just for daytime. So the Aborigines certainly had their own form of mythology, just not constellations. And then this is entertaining too. There are actually a series of what's called the lost constellations. There for a while, cultures named the same constellation different stuff. And then that went into like the European style versus the American style. And we would all call the same constellation very different names. It got horribly confusing, which makes sense. It very much makes sense to finally get our names together. But there's 82 constellations that either got merged or just nixed all together, all over the place. Recognized by the IAU. IAU is the International Astronomical Union. They're the same people that demoted Pluto. Ding, ding. So the same people. This is actually their true job right here, not planets. This is their true job. So prior to 1930, we had a lot of really odd constellations. And like I said, there's 82, and I'm not going to list all 82 for you guys. But these were some of the interesting ones. My favorite's probably either the hot air balloon or the electric generator from the 1800s. I would have loved to have an electric generator constellation. No mythology whatsoever. There was actually a whole list of different machines that were constellations at the time. But you know how cool that would have been? Also, who wants a slug for a constellation? Whose idea was that? I'm glad that's gone. Ugh. I don't want to be an astronomer like, oh, we discovered a brand new type of black hole supernova, hypernova. Where is it? Oh, it's in the slug. No. No, thank you. I'm glad that went away. Let it be in the electric generator. Alrighty, guys. I hope you guys are ready for your little letters, though, because I'm going to do 3 rounds. This is what I love to do with students. I've done this with middle schoolers too, so all is well. But I want to see what you guys think about weird constellations. Which one do you think is not a constellation? A ram, toucan, a mouse, and a chameleon. I'm very entertained to see which ones you're going to pick. That's good that people are guessing different. It makes it all the more fun. Alrighty, so it happens to actually be the mouse. Yes. Yeah, like the one guy got it. Yes, so we have. So no one, I guess, the ram, so that's good, we know Aries. There is a toucan, toucana, and then there is a chameleon named Chameleon. It's a really tiny constellation. Okay, that was a warm-up. Round 2. A unicorn, a stegosaurus, a dragon, or a furnace? This one might be a little tricky, but we'll see. Actually, no, I'm seeing quite a few right answers. Alrighty, so it is actually the stegosaurus. We do have a furnace. That was made up by Englishmen back in the 1800s, named Fornax. And then Monoceros, meaning mono, one horn, and then Draco the dragon. All right, last round. A giraffe, a peacock, a clock, or a panda? This is probably the hardest one, but we'll see. Oh man, I'm seeing all colors. This is great. Oh boy, which is not a constellation. All right, guys ready? You guys ready for the answer? It's a panda. Yes. So, yep, so pavo, Latin for peacock. I want to draw your attention to the giraffe one, though. Usually a lot of people pick giraffe to not be a constellation, but lo and behold, we do have a giraffe constellation. But look at the name, Camelopardalis. It's actually camel leopard, which makes sense. That's exactly what a giraffe is, a camel leopard. Now every time you go to the zoo, you're going to go, camel leopard. It makes sense. Okay. Other than that, there really is no mythology to any of these. Let's put a giraffe in the sky. Okay. Or a peacock or a clock. The clock one doesn't even look like a clock. It looks like a square, and that's about it, unfortunately, though. But essentially, the world of constellations, in modern times, unfortunately, astronomers don't really get a chance to really have fun with the mythology. We mainly just use it for maps, like I said before, though. But delving into the mythology and how did we even create those constellations really ties in together. How did societies come about? How did we share stories? How did we share legends and tales of great and glory, or just really random stuff that the gods are doing in the heavens? Oh, they're having a party? Great. I wonder what constellation they're going to come up with now. So that's about it for tonight, though. So thank you guys for coming out tonight. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. Or you can randomly ask me space questions, too. Either one's fine. Otherwise, I really hope to be back and do more space stuff in the fall. That'd be really fun. Yeah.
You said the purposes of why people started studying the stars and planets. You said mythology, navigation, agriculture. What was the fourth one?
Mainly for mathematics, either whether it's for mapping, knowing where Polaris was and latitudes really helped figure out, like, okay, if a navigator's in Europe versus Asia, and they realized, oh wait, Polaris is different, they could figure out certainly how spherical their travels have been, the latitudes. What we do is something called anything from right ascension declination, which is the sky coordinates. So the sky is certainly not flat to us astronomers. Everything's a sphere, which is a headache for geometry. But we don't have latitude and longitude. You look at a map, you have latitude and longitude. You just flatten a globe. In the sky, you can't really do that. So we have what's called right ascension declination. It works the same way. It's like right ascension, declination, boop, there's a star. A whole bunch of maps.
How close could, if you were just dropped somewhere random, how close could you, with all, of course, with computers and everything, but how close could you tell where you're at by looking at the sky? how close could you pinpoint where you're at on the map?
One, I hope you have dark enough skies, because if you're in the middle of a city, you hope to ask.
Just, I mean, if you were just like somewhere where it's dark, and you could see all the stars and everything, could you calculate where you were at, if you didn't know where you were at in the world, but could you calculate and find out where you were at?
As long as you know where Polaris is, if you know where the North Star is.
How close could you get to where, I mean, exactly if you were in Fayetteville, Arkansas versus Moscow?
The North Star would be different in position of the sky. So for us, Polaris would be here, which is about 45 degrees. Moscow, it's a bit more north.
But how close could you get to pinpointing exactly where you were standing?
You could tell the continent.
At least the continent and the latitude, but as far as like if you happen to be in Moscow versus just Siberia in general, no. Nope. Hopefully you never have to find yourself in that position. Absolutely, absolutely. No, otherwise we teach Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts how to find the North Star. So, and it's worked for navigators. Now, by all means, certainly for the North Star, you have to be in the northern hemisphere. In the south, it doesn't work as well, or at all. They've actually had to navigate by different stars, different star systems, weather, the Milky Way tilts differently in the south as well. So they used a very different star system. In the southern hemisphere, yeah. Yes.
Are you an astronomer?
I am.
Oh, okay, I haven't first shown.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Do you work for the U of A?
I do.
What are they doing at the U of A right now for like the astronomy program?
So we're actually doing a whole bunch of stuff though, but none of us actually use constellations. This was just a fun thing to do. But unfortunately, none of us are actually working on stars. A whole bunch of stuff. I'm actually in the planetary part of the U of A, so I work on Pluto. We have an astrobiology section, so they work on how life can be possible on Mars. And then we have a galaxy and black hole section. So how spiral galaxies become spiral, how do arms become spiral in that regard, and then how active black holes can be in those galaxies. So we do a whole random bunch of stuff.
Pluto, you examine photos of it, or?
I look at photos from New Horizons. So I'm friends. I'm colleagues with some of the mission team members. So I get to see the photos before they're publicly released. So, but I'm under contract to be quiet about some stuff, which yeah, under oath. But I also run the Pluto Lab at the University of Arkansas as well. So my lab, my mad scientist lab, I could actually simulate the temperatures and pressures of Pluto in my lab safely, by all means, because Pluto is about -400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cold, a little bit cold in my lab. I can freeze blood. No, it's perfectly safe. Knock on wood. Surprisingly, no. So the planetary department, or the planetary side of things, is actually in a completely different building. We are very much hidden. Actually, the university sometimes forgets that where our building is, which has happened. I was waiting for a package and they got the wrong building. Oops. But no, our lab is actually, if you know where Faraday is, we're in the sub-basement. Yes, people don't remember where Faraday is either. If you know where the Science and Engineering building is, okay, it's the building behind that, and then we're in the sub-basement of that building. Yep.
Are all the constellations you mentioned tonight, are they all usually visible here?
Some of them, most of them. The clock constellation is not. The what?
Usually visible, the bear one? Or
The bear? Oh yeah, absolutely. If you could find the bear, you know where the North Star is. Yeah, you need the bear. You need the bear for navigation. It's a very odd sentence to say, but you know what I mean by it. You need the bear. Yes. It sounds like you're on a quest. You need the bear for guidance. But like the giraffe, Camelopardalis, that's actually in our northern sky. Cygnus is, Scorpio is. Actually, all constellations I talked to you about, except for the trivia rounds and whatnot, are in our northern sky. Yep, so very interesting constellations.
Does the university still have a planetarium of like some kind?
Oh, unfortunately not. So yeah, we were trying to build one actually, and unfortunately we lost funding. The university had us dismantle it. So yeah, we have most of the parts, but we are not allowed to rebuild it as of now. However, there is talk that the Northwest Arkansas, these guys, Northwest Arkansas.space, if you go to their website, they are a local astronomy group, and they're hoping to build a permanent planetarium in the area of Fayetteville for the public, which would be great. So if you are totally behind it, send them a message and tell them I sent you, because I'm honorary member. I do a weekly blog for them on their website and just do random weekly space facts. So if you just really randomly want to know about random space stuff and look at pretty pictures once a week, every Monday, check that out. Yes?
I heard there is a giant telescope that is supposed to be moving or has moved here from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same thing?
Not the same thing, but same group.
Okay, is it in Pennsylvania?
Yeah,
It's already here.
it's already here.
And like, how accessible is that to the public?
I have no idea, because I think they're still trying to get it more public.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you know exactly where it is?
unfortunately not. I think they may have finally moved it to Springdale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's slowly making its way, but right now they're still trying to find a space to set up a whole facility to have it as its crowning jewel.
Yeah.
Because right now you can't have it outside, it's an antique. So they still need to build something around it. Oh yeah, it's a beautiful antique telescope. And I used to renovate old antique telescopes many years ago. So it's huge. It is big, it's beautiful. But yeah, I think they still trying to figure out how to build a facility around it to showcase it.
Cool. So how advanced is it, like in comparison to like the Hubble?
Oh no, nothing's as big as the Hubble. The Hubble Space Telescope's as big as a school bus. Yeah, so
How
it's.
big is this one?
This one is, if I remember it, because I've only seen it through pictures, but I believe it might be, at least from the edge of the stage to about here-ish. That's my error bar. Around about. It's a long telescope, which most antique telescopes are. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Yeah.
How long does it take information to come from the satellite from Pluto to Earth?
Well, now that it's past Pluto, rapidly past Pluto now, it takes, let's see, I'd say it takes about 12 to 14 hours one way. So if we have to tell it to do something, we have to wait for it to actually get the signal in 12 hours, and then another 12 hours for it to send a signal going, okay. So it's a lot of waiting around. I get to play with images. We already have all the images we have of Pluto, so my job of waiting is done. But it's on its way to its next target, which will be there by New Year's, actually. So They did not mean to time it that well, but it just happens to be on New Year's, so all the New Horizons people ready for stage 2 are getting up and ready and running around quickly like, we need to talk to it now, and because it's going to take longer and longer for us to communicate with it. So, but New Horizons has not been the trickiest one to communicate with. It's actually been the Voyager missions. It's made it out of our solar system. It's now officially out of the sun's orb. So, sun's orb, meaning the sun's magnetic sphere, the sun's gravity, everything, the sun, basically just can't reach it anymore. Voyager's way out there.
Contact it?
Yeah, so we could still contact it, which is amazing because this thing is from the 60s. So the technology is still surviving way out there in completely cold temperatures. But also, it still communicated back to us. Not only did it receive a signal, it said hello back to us. Even though, the perfect analogy for this too is trying to start, let's see, what was the analogy that NASA used? It was a brilliant analogy. Trying to start a 70-year-old car when you are almost just hundreds and hundreds of miles away, trying to start a car, and it still took more than 30 hours for the car to turn on. One way. So another 30 hours to come back to us going, okay, I turned on.
No sun for energy, though.
Nope, no sun for energy. That's the beauty part of Voyager, is that we put it on full thrust mode so quickly, rammed it right through. But the best part is we actually saved fuel. The Voyager engineers, I applaud. They timed it so perfectly. They had a little bit of a time window to launch that sucker out, but their timing was perfect. This was an once in 80-year opportunity to save fuel. And what happened is that they had alignment of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And what happened is that they were going toward Jupiter, and then it was like monkey bars. Swing, 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 and out. They didn't have to use a single drop of fuel because they used all that gravity just to slingshot around. So once an 80-year time window, and they timed it perfectly. So they still had reserve fuel left. So no, it ran out of fuels, but it's still going. So physics has it where you just keep going as long as nothing bumps into you. And in space, anything can bump into you. So it's a wonder that nothing has right into it. Which would be still cool to do, but at the same time, I don't think NASA would be very, very happy with that. All right, well, if there's no more questions, then thank you guys for coming out and enjoy the weather.